With the Commanders' recent success with Taylor Heinicke at the helm, where do you think this team could go from here now that they're sitting at a 7-5 record in the NFC East?
Dude, it's weird because they've won 6 of the last 7. Taylor Heinicke, like Kyle just said, is not the quarterback that's going to go out there and win you a game with 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, whatever the case may be. But he's someone that can get you the key first downs, limit the turnovers, rally the team, and just be an overall good teammate. Sometimes that's what you need. And we've talked about this multiple times on the show where people are misconstrued like quarterbacks got to go out there and put up 450, 500 yards like a Patrick Mahomes on a week in and week out basis. This is a team sport. And the Commanders did what they needed to do to minimize Atlanta's offense. They held them to 13 points. Now, that goes to say that, Washington wasn't much better considering they only had 19, but that was enough to win. Not all wins are going to be pretty. Not all wins are going to be blowouts or fancy, but when Taylor Heinicke goes for 138, 2 touchdowns, he did have an interception, but no sacks and no fumbles. So you limit to 1 turnover the entire game. He had a good passer rating, 88.7, nothing too flashy. But I mean, again, he doesn't need to go out there and carve up the box score for me. He doesn't need to go out there and absolutely throw a perfect game going 23 for 23. He needs to do enough to move the chains, keep the ball away from the other team, and not hinder his ability to win in terms of keeping the team from winning. And that's what they're doing. That's the key phrase. It is just like we said in the Jets segment. This is a guy that's coming out of left field that has been a career backup that was basically out of the league a few years ago, and now he's starting for the Washington Commanders in terms of this push for a playoff berth. Because as of right now, the way that it ended tonight after the Eagles game, everybody that is in a wild card spot is in the NFC East. The Cowboys, the Giants, and the Commanders are the 3 wild card teams in the NFC. If it were to end today, absolutely insane. We'll talk about that another day because that's another segment in and of itself. We've talked about the NFC East a multitude of times, but this is just going to show, wow, the Commanders aren't a joke. They don't even have Chase Young back, and this defense has found a way to turn this completely around. Ron Rivera was on the hot seat as the year started to move forward, and like I said, 6 of 7. It speaks volume. Carson Wentz was supposedly brought in here to add a different spark to this offense, hopefully a quarterback for the future, similar to what he was hoped to be for the Colts, and he gets replaced by Taylor Heinicke, who played okay football last year. But I mean, when you're just going out there and you're putting up 176 yards on the ground, when you're going out there and you're sacking Marcus Mariota, well, never mind, sacked one time. He was pressured a decent amount, but in terms of finding ways to turn the ball over, they did get an interception on Mariota as well. But the Commanders' rush defense was a little suspect. They gave up 167 on the ground, almost 6 yards per carry to the Falcons. I mean, Tyler Algier had 54, Cordero Patterson had 52. Mariota had 49 himself. I mean, that just goes to show, like, they were kind of, excuse my French, like Zeke would say, everybody was eating at their own freaking pace. So it's not like the Commanders were able to really slow much down other than Marcus Mariota in the air. But again, they did what they needed to do. They capitalized. It wasn't flashy, but all that matters is they got that W at the end of the day. And at 7-5 compared to what they were just a month ago, I'd say that the Commanders are in a pretty good place right now to compete at least for a playoff berth because Taylor Heinicke has completely shifted the morale in that Commanders locker room.
Yeah, Kev, I'm kind of in a similar sentiment with you. It's just been kind of surprising just to see how good the NFC East this year is as a whole, based on what it was looking, based off of what it was looking like going into the season, because we did not really have that high hopes for the division, and yet it's by far the most competitive division that we've seen in the NFL this year. And when it comes to the Commanders' effectiveness in these wins that they've been able to pick up, I would say that by and large, it's really been a well balanced effort where the offense is doing enough to limit turnovers, be able to just get consistent enough drives to be able to get points on the board as far as field goals are concerned, and then potentially getting touchdowns, whether it comes in the form of Taylor Heinicke passing the ball or getting production on the ground game. And we have seen Brian Robinson in particular really kind of step up in these big pivotal games that they've needed to win the last couple of weeks to be able to at least give them a decent look at the ground game. And like I said, this is a well balanced team here. Just because I don't think that like one component of the offense uh, overtakes another, and The defense has really been playing solid the last month or so. And I think really the biggest question from here on out is whether or not they could be able to maintain it. And I'm looking at their schedule right now. Their next two games are against the Giants. Uh, they play against the Giants next on December 4th. Then they have a bye week, and then they play the Giants on the 18th. So they play them in back-to-back games. Then they got a real test. They got to play the 49ers on the road on Christmas Eve. That's going to be a tricky one for them. And I'm not so sure that they're going to be able to pull that one out. The only way they'd be able to win that game is if they were able to stifle that Jimmy G led offense. Not only that, you got Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle. I mean, they've got some decent weapons out there in San Fran, and there's no guarantee that Washington's going to be able to play up to snuff against that offense. Then they have a pretty winnable game against the Browns at home on New Year's Day, and then they finish it out with the Cowboys. So there are some winnable games here. These next two games against the Giants, these are winnable games simply just because the amount of injuries that the Giants have sustained this year is just absolutely crippling for them. And the Commanders, we'll see whether or not they could integrate Chase Young back into the fold. There was a chance that he could have played in this game against the Falcons. If he's able to come back and provide a spark for that defense, this defense could even play at a higher level than what they've been playing at really the last probably 3-4 weeks. And who knows? I think that their chances of making the playoffs are still open, but they can't drop games that they should win. And as long as they're competitive in games that they're underdogs in, at least it'll have a good look for them, even if they come out on the losing side. And who knows? Maybe they can get a surprise win against the 49ers, or maybe a win against the Cowboys. It could be a situation where the Commanders could be fighting for one of those last wild card spots in the NFC playoff picture. But I think as of right now, I wouldn't say that the Commanders are this team that everybody should be fearful of. This is a dark horse Super Bowl team. I don't envision that with the Commanders. They just simply do not have the offensive firepower to be able to go up against teams like the Eagles or the Vikings or the 49ers. I threw the 49ers in there simply just because I think that they have that capability at times. But maybe they could play spoiler if they were to get into the playoffs. Maybe they could win one of those wild card games and actually get into a divisional round game. I still think that Taylor Heinicke has provided them a decent service for them, and he's done more good for them than harm. I think at this point, though, it's whether or not that they could be able to take that offense to another level, another step higher, to possibly compete against those top tier teams in the NFC. But I just haven't seen enough from them yet. But as of right now, they've been very solid. 7-5 record is nothing to joke at. It could be a lot worse. And overall, you could say that Taylor Heinicke maybe saved Ron Rivera's job, like Kevin said. Rivera's job was potentially on the hot seat about a month and a half ago. The Commanders were not in a good place at that point in time, but they have completely flipped the narrative, and I think it's really been based off of what Taylor Heinicke's done, Brian Robinson's done out of the backfield, and the defense really playing up to snuff. So overall, Commanders are in a good spot here, but there's still work to be done as far as I see it.